Good morning, everybody. I am here with you with the Henshin Mystic, the incredible monk that most people have not really thought about playing. I have been playing at the endgame in a DPS style, the Vanguard Fighter. I really enjoy Vanguard Fighter. I think it's really strong. I think it has a lot of good utility. I think it does a really high amount of damage, and I enjoy it so much. But I've been doing it pretty consistently for about 2 years and decided, hey, why don't I try to find another character that can change up the playstyle a bit but still be very strong melee DPS? And so I decided to choose Henshin Mystic. Now, a lot of you are going to tell me that, single target is best done on a Fist Monk and not on a Henshin Mystic. But I really wanted to test that out, especially considering there are some very good benefits you get out of the Henshin Mystic, such as the Cauldron of Flame. As well, the Staff of Shadow is an extremely powerful melee weapon for the endgame. And with some of the reworked Epic Destinies, I just felt like there could be some different ideas that you can throw around to make the Henshin Mystic very powerful. So I leveled up Henshin Mystic all the way to 30. I did it with the best build that I thought I could possibly come by, making sure I'm focusing on the wisdom so that all the spells are working. I'm getting the good Cauldron of Flame damage, and then of course trying to make sure I'm picking the right Epic Destiny to get the most effectiveness out of my character. Since I'm using a two-handed weapon, I decided to go with Fury of the Wild as my destiny of choice to test out this build, because I wanted to play something that wasn't going to be strictly Legendary Dreadnought, considering I've done that for the past 2 years. So I went with Fury of the Wild, since it felt like it was going to do better than Divine Crusader or Grandmaster of Flowers, since I'm using a two-handed weapon. At the end of the day, the damage is pretty good, and the single target feels really strong. But one of the main problems is that the single target really only feels strong while you have Unbridled Fury up, where you're constantly slamming guys for 20,000 damage every couple of hits. Outside of Unbridled Fury, Fury of the Wild feels pretty fine. I mean, it's good when you get to knock guys over by using your adrenaline and then getting helpless damage against them, and the extra helplessness damage is pretty nice against trash mobs, but for the most part, I don't know, it just never felt like it was doing as much damage as the Vanguard Fighter, and I didn't feel like I had more utility, because Fury of the Wild really doesn't provide any utility. Now, of course, I had utility from playing as a monk, like going as the Falconer, so I had all the falconry attacks, and then I also happened to have the Fury attacks, and I hit all my monk attacks. But then what also happens is you kind of just get an overload of attacks. It was just so many different buttons to press all at the same time. And I'm not usually somebody to complain about having a lot of different buttons to press, because I like to tout around the fact that I've got a whole bunch of keybinds, so I know how to press all the keyboard buttons. But really what happens is, instead of it being something where you have a lot of things keybound because when you need them you can press the button, instead it's something where you're kind of pressing all of your keys all of the time, using about 10 to 15 different skills constantly. And when sitting and playing at the computer for a few hours, it gets very tiring very quickly. Now granted, it was extremely strong to level with, and I went very quickly. You don't have to worry about running into monsters that you can't take down, or especially through the end game, worrying about Epic Elite difficulty, because the Henshin Mystic is able to heal itself extremely quickly and very effectively. Gearing was also super nice, because this character only really required the Staff of Shadow as its end game weapon, which I highly recommend you acquire either before playing the Henshin Mystic, or make it your main goal to try to get one if you want to play it in the end game. For leveling purposes, I just used an Elemental Bloom, and yeah, that staff, even though it was nerfed, is still super high damage, so it's going to carry you throughout the entire game. However, from playing through the Henshin Mystic, I actually learned a lot about the character and kind of what makes some of the things in it good. One of the biggest things that I learned is that generally if you play as a monk, you almost always want to go as a light monk, giving you access to the Fists of Light ability, so that way you can use the healing key, allowing you to heal yourself and your allies. This was really important, and I use it a lot right up until level 12. However, once you hit level 12, the Henshin Mystic gets an ability where they can pick a attack from the opposite philosophy. So if you're a light monk, you can pick a dark monk attack that happens to do negative levels on targets that you're attacking, as well as negative levels to all of the monsters that are around it. But if you're playing as a dark monk, you get to pick an attack where you hit a monster and then it heals you and all allies for 100 health. Now that 100 health doesn't go up or down, it just stays at 100. However, if you have healing amplification, it gives you more healing. On top of that, if you happen to have double strike and you double strike with the attack, it actually does a double healing effect. And if you have it so that glancing blows can proc special effects, then you can also get this to proc on glancing blows as well. Sometimes able to just hit one monster with this spell and then have it hit about 6 or 7 guys, and all of a sudden everything is double striking and you've healed yourself back up to full with one quick strike. The problem is, you really want to have Fists of Light until level 12, and if you're a light monk, you can't take the light Henshin Mystic ability that allows you to heal yourself and all your friends. So what I ended up doing is using a feat swap to change my philosophy to dark, and then I could take the light monk ability. It's kind of unfortunate, and I feel like that's one of the best ways to do it, unless you have some other way to heal yourself through content. But either go through and do the feat swap, because everyone gets a feat swap every life, or just start as a Dark Monk, suffer through it, and then get your big healing spell once you hit level 12. Now, one of the issues with playing as a two-handed character is that the idea is that you're supposed to get glancing blows to make them very, very powerful, and to make your two-handed weapons feel like you're cleaving down whole packs of enemies by just swinging the weapon. Now, the problem is, glancing blows don't scale off critical strike damage in any capacity, which basically means that they're not very good. Critical strike damage is pretty much the only way to scale melee and range damage into the endgame, and it's one of the reasons why Adrenaline in Fury of the Wild feels so powerful, because while you're playing in Fury of the Wild, you just happen to get so many big critical strikes, it's super powerful. But that doesn't really translate over to your glancing blow damage. So, you hit a guy for 50,000 damage with Adrenaline, but then, when you actually get the glancing blow does like 400 because it's not actually critically striking, it's not multiplying through anything. So at the end of the day, glancing blow damage becomes a very, very small portion of your damage, even when fully speccing into it with every single feat that gives you glancing blows. On top of that, the glancing blows don't apply on double strikes either. So you get a lot of double strike and you get a lot of crit and crit multiplier, you crit guys, and then the glancing blow damage really falls behind where you're actually supposed to be hitting. And I think this is kind of a huge problem. If I was to remedy this going forward, I think that what I would do is probably alter how glancing blows are scaled based on the amount of damage that you're doing, because really that's the crux of the issue. Two-handed weapons are supposed to be these big weapons that do a whole bunch of additional damage, but when they use the same scaling effects as all the other weapon types, all of a sudden anything that hits faster and then happens to have better crit multipliers and better scaling of double strike is going to do more damage overall. It's kind of the fatal flaw with this weapon type. Like, just consider how if you're playing as a fist monk, then you can have a 100% double strike and a 90% offhand attack chance, as well as a 35% offhand double strike. So now when you're playing with your fist monk, every time you press the key to attack the button, you just press the mouse and you attack a monster, you punch them once, you have your double strike, you have your 90% chance for an offhand strike, and that offhand strike has a 35% chance to produce a double strike. So just by pressing the button once, you get, what is it, like 3.3 attacks off on a monster every time you press the button? Whereas if you play as a two-handed weapon, you get your attack, then you get your double strike, and then you get the glancing blow, and the glancing blow does half damage and can't critically strike, unlike all the other stuff from the monk, which can the fist monk, which can critically strike. And the double strike also doesn't propagate the adrenaline, so the additional damage you get from adrenaline, it's not like if you attack a guy with adrenaline, you do 2 adrenaline hits. You actually don't. You only do the first strike counts as adrenaline, it absorbs the adrenaline buff, and then the second strike doesn't count as adrenaline. My biggest suggestion would be to change how double strike scales with all of the two-handed weapons just in general. I think if while using a two-handed weapon, instead of getting double strike at all, you got just double damage, so double strike had a % chance to double the damage that your attacks were doing, I think that would probably make a lot more sense within context of how double strike is supposed to work, and how double strike can actually work with the two-handed weapon. So that it was something like, oh, if you have 100% double strike with a two-handed weapon, it just doubles the damage you deal when you hit guys, almost sort of like melee power, except it's another multiplier, which as well allows it so that it applies to cleaves, which most two-handed weapon characters use, as well as glancing blows, because they'll also get their damage doubled. And the final big issue I had at endgame, which is why I'm actually going to be re-rolling this character into something else in the quest to find something to replace the Vanguard fighter, was that I didn't really have enough accuracy to actually play the game. At endgame, I was only able to hit around 170, even 180 with bard buffs, which meant that there were a lot of situations when playing around in Sharn and doing some of the raids where I just couldn't hit the monsters. When you're missing 5, 10, under 5 or under 10 when you attack on a monster, and that means that about 25% of your hits just aren't landing, that's a huge problem. It also means, since the character is based in Fury of the Wild, and it's all about getting these 400% damage and these guaranteed crits, well, if I can't confirm my critical strike because my hit chance is too low, that causes a big issue. Now, some of that can be exacerbated by the fact that the new feat, Ancient Power, that you get out of the Primal Past Lives that gave plus to hit, actually wasn't working, so it gave no plus to hit. But even taking that aside, you run into the issue where a lot of the single weapon fighters or the 2 weapon fighters are using precision stance to give them a 5% increase in their attack hit chance, whereas two-handed fighters are using power attack, which reduces their hit chance. I think it's probably the time to give a buff to two-handed fighters, and just all fighters in general, make it so that power attack doesn't have a penalty. I think the power attack having a -5 to hit is also a bit of a problem, because it makes it so that essentially two-handed fighters are kind of nerfed from the get-go. Sure, it gives them a lot of damage right away, but precision stance has no drawback, and it's super duper powerful. If I could, and if it was just worth it, I would probably swap into precision stance out of the power attack, and in fact that's what I ended up doing with my monk at the end, because it just made it so that I was doing more damage in general, and I was able to outlast my opponents. So honestly, I think that there should be dropping the accuracy reduction from power attack and just change it into something else. Even if there's another drawback, maybe reduce armor class or something, but the accuracy just makes it so you can't play when you hit the end game. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't try the Henshin Mystic Monk. I actually enjoyed it a lot. I had a lot of fun. The spells were just fun to throw around and play with. It was really easy to play, getting all the cleaves, and it was super fast level. I cannot stress how much damage it did during the leveling process, thanks to all the free melee power. And on top of that, it's still decent for the end game. But for what I want is I want a character that can smash stuff and re-pretend very, very quickly, and that's just not what this character provided, so I'm going to be continuing to look to the horizon. However, I'm going to show you what it takes to make a staff monk so that you can try it out for yourself and see what it's all about. And so here we have it, the Henshin Mystic Monk. I also happen to, I want a Tresor Room kitty, so I got my Tresor Room kitty in the background to go with my kitty that sometimes sits with me. I like cats, okay, so I'm glad I got it. But, monk. So this is the idea behind the monk. It was to play as a pure monk, focusing specifically on the Henshin Mystic, on staffs. And I got some pretty good, pretty respectable defensive stats on this character. I actually didn't finish gearing out 100%. I'm still missing a Slave Lord's piece I'm going to get before I go do a raid on Friday. Hopefully we'll beat it. We're planning on doing Reaper 5 Project Nemesis, and if I do that, you'll definitely get a video here on the channel so you can see how that was done. However, this character, how do you put it together? Well, of course, one of the most important things is the wisdom. Wisdom is pretty much one of the core stats for this character. You need as much wisdom as possible. It's your hit, it's your damage, it fuels a lot of your monk abilities, most specifically your Cauldron of Flame DC, as well as wisdom is going to be powering your dire charge. So you need wisdom to make sure the character actually physically works. As far as defenses go, I'm actually missing saves, and I'm missing some physical resistance rating. So this character, in combat, is going to be sitting around almost 100 saves without the ability to fail reflex saves, as well as around 200 physical resistance rating and 90 magical resistance rating thanks to my filigrees. As far as the skills went, I maxed out pretty basic stuff. You need to use Magic Device. I put 1 point in Tumble so I could tumble around. Decided to put some points in Swim when I had extra points, but I mostly use Spot, Jump, Concentration, Balance. These are the ones that are going to help you a lot. Jump, just because you don't get that as a spell or anything, and you need to be able to jump over stuff in the game. Spot's useful, Concentration is useful, Balance is useful, and I like swimming fast. As far as the feats went, during the leveling process, I decided to start with enough strength so that right away I would be able to take Power Attack and Cleave. This is essentially what allows you to level through the game super duper fast. You have Power Attack, turn it on for some extra damage, and then you take Cleave. This character doesn't really have a lot of past lives at all, so I did take some Toughness feats just to fill up the curve, because Toughness, not basic. Where's Toughness? There's Toughness. I don't know where Toughness is, but I took a bunch of Toughness feats because it's just generally useful for a character like this, maybe defensive. I don't know. I also took the feat Dodge because just getting some extra dodge is really nice. This character is supposed to have a fully fleshed out dodge once I do some rearrangements because I am planning on using the legendary animated rope to get an extra 17% dodge. So with the animated rope on, I'm losing some health because I'm still trying to fill up my health curve. But essentially it gives me a 36% dodge all the time, which is really, really nice, as well as threat reduction or aggro reduction from this belt, and then deception, so I can actually sneak attack people and get some extra hit chance, which is pretty nice. So that's kind of the idea behind that. So you'd grab Cleave right away, then you want to make sure you're picking up Swords to Plowshares at level 6, because this then allows you to get an extra +1 critical threat range on your quarter staff. I took Improved Critical Bludgeoning at 12. I made sure also to take the Two-Handed Fighting line. Is Two-Handed Fighting not under martial feats? Combat style feats? Yeah, combat styles, there we go. So I took the Two-Handed Fighting Greater and Improved Two-Handed Fighting to make sure my character had a decent amount of defense. Important thing to note about this character is I actually did start out as the Light Monk. So under the Monk feats, I definitely was a Light Monk to start out by taking the Path of the Harmonious Balance. However, I ended up swapping that later as I was during the leveling process into Path of the Inevitable Dominion, because you want to get one of the abilities later in the Henshin Mystic Tree that requires you to be a Dark Monk. And I'll explain that in a bit, but essentially start with the Light Monk, get the healing power, then swap it out later when you get a new heal out of the Henshin Mystic Tree. As far as epic feats go, it was pretty basic. I mean, I grabbed stuff you would kind of expect. Overwhelming Critical, Improved Martial Arts. I wasn't super happy with Improved Martial Arts, just because the +5 or 0.5W is not a huge increase in base damage. Probably would have taken something like Toughness just for some extra health. Took Epic Reflexes so I don't fail reflex saves on a 1. Epic Damage Reduction since you don't get a lot of physical resistance rating when you wear cloth armor. And then, of course, I took Perfect Two-Handed and Perfect Two-Weapon Fighting. It sounds weird to take Perfect Two-Weapon Fighting, but again, I take it on all my builds because this just gives 5% double strike no matter what, and it has basically no requirements, so you can just take it whenever you feel like it. Dire Charge is the big thing, and my legendary feat, I took Scion of Arborea. because it gives melee power, gives hit chance, gives spell power I don't need, and fortitude saves, sure, get some extra fortitude saves, you can't complain about that. As far as the enhancements go, for this character, I have it split between the 3 trees. We have Azamar, Henshin Mystic, and Falconry. Now, I highly recommend that if you're planning on playing this character, make sure that you have at least 82 points to spend. 82 points is going to let you spend 23 points in this tree here, so that way you can get Deadly Instinct, you can get a little bit of the extra helplessness damage from No Mercy, and you can get Expose Weakness. However, if you don't have any additional racial points or any additional universal enhancement points, you can still play this build, but you're going to be lacking a few things. You pretty much just give up Expose Weakness and No Mercy to make sure you're picking up the 3 stacks of Deadly Instinct right here. Now, of course, what did I do? Well, Henshin Mystic, I just took all the good stuff. You take the cores because they're good. You take the stuff that gives you extra damage because extra damage is pretty useful. You take the elemental negative, or these are like little attacks that make monsters more vulnerable to different elements. It's good to have these because you never know when you're going to be playing with a sorcerer or some other character that you can just automatically hit pretty much every target that comes into a fight and give them a stack of vulnerability, which is just really nice and helpful for other players. Plus, you want to go up and get Void Strike. This is kind of your bread and butter. You use this every 3 seconds as soon as it comes off cooldown, and you're just whacking people. Plus 3 W, plus 1 threat range, plus 1 multiplier, 10d6 force, and it has an instant kill on it if you Vorpal them. Conveniently, because I'm playing in Fury of the Wild, it's going to all come together. The updated Fury of the Wild has this ability, Bloodbath, which makes it so your Vorpal threat range is on a 19 or a 20. So 10% of the time, when I use my Void Strike, it instantly kills targets. Conveniently enough, you also get the ability Malicious Weapons, which causes weapon effects to trigger on glancing blows, which means I can actually kill multiple guys at the same time because my Void Strike can work on my glancing blow, and if my glancing blow hit chance also happens to roll a 19 or 20, I also kill that guy. It was very rare when that happened, but it felt super good when it did. You take the Staff Specialization, and then you take Shadows Cannot Exist Without Light. And this is pretty much the reason why we go with the negative, or the Path of Inevitable Dominion, as opposed to the Harmonious Balance. And it's because this ability, you hit a guy, and it heals you and all allies for 100 positive energy healing, which is great. It doesn't scale off of anything, so it sounds like it's kind of bad, but it works with your healing amplification. So if you hit somebody, then you suddenly heal for 100 health, and that's not too bad, and all of your allies. However, if you double strike, this actually allows you to heal twice, because it hits twice. So now you're healing for 200, and so that's healing you and everyone else around you for 200. But wait, there's more, because remember how I was talking about this extra % chance for weapon effects to trigger on glancing blows? As it turns out, this counts as a weapon effect. So you can use Shadows Cannot Exist Without Light, and sometimes you'll get 4, 5, 6 instances of this happening at the same time. Healing for an extra 600 to everybody every 6 seconds is fantastic. On top of that, because this happens every 6 seconds, if you need to bump out a healing key, you can just go ahead and start hitting the button, and this actually counts as a light ability. So because this counts as a light effect, I can use this 3 times in a row and suddenly produce the actual healing key effect. Now generally you're not going to be using healing key because you don't have an enhancement from the elemental curatives, but if I really wanted to, I can go woof and then do a little bit of a heal here. However, the big thing is you're pretty much always just slamming back and forth Void Strike, and then Shadows Cannot Exist Without Light during the leveling process. So it's Void Strike, then Shadows Cannot Exist Without Light, and then my Void Strike is off cooldown, and then what's this? You get Moment of Clarity. Moment of Clarity is a finisher that allows you to get +5 bonus to hit and +5 skill checks for a very short period of time. It's only 10 seconds. I wish it was longer than 10 seconds because it is way too short. However, this ability is still kind of nice. It doesn't work in town for some reason, but it is helpful when you're heading into a fight. Don't use it during combat, but it's helpful before combat to give you that extra hit chance. And hit chance kind of is the name of the game. One of the things that this character lacks is hit chance. Right now, standing around, I'm at plus 160 before I turn on power attack. You want to make sure you have power attack turned on because it gives you a lot of that base damage at 155. I'm about 30 points short of where I need to be when it comes to hit chance, and I have pretty much every hit chance item and effect on in the game. Now, granted, I do happen to have this Ancient Power, which now works, so it actually gives me hit chance. In fact, this is giving me 4 hit chance. What? Why is this giving me 4 hit chance? Anyway. Apparently it gives 4 hit chance now. I only have 1 stack. Wait, does this give plus 12 hit chance if you have 3 stacks? Maybe that's good. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Hit chance is the name of the game. This character is not too difficult to gear out, but the issue of not having enough hit chance kind of makes you run into the ground. So if you can get more crit hit chance, either from having a bard in your party or from having past lives, like this ancient power, like energy, or not energy criticals, like enchant weapon, like fighter past life, you're able to pick up, I guess thanks to this, an extra like almost 14, 18 hit chance or something, just out of past lives, and then also just finding ways to increase your wisdom and using more offensive filigree. This character, because I'm in the gearing process, I'm using relatively defensive filigree, like Nyastil's Mystical Defense and City's Beacon. However, once this character is fully geared, I would swap out for a bunch of Sucker Punch and other things to give me a lot more hit chance as well as a lot more melee power. So this character is still missing about 50 melee power from where I want it, and is currently sitting at a cool 202, and as I said, I'm about 50 off from where I would want to be. But character's still pretty good, really fun to play, and I enjoyed it a lot. The general leveling process was you walk into a pack of monsters, you cleave them, and then you start hitting them and beating them to death with all of your attacks. You pretty much sit in Ocean Stance the entire time. You pick up Ocean Stance once you get Sounding Staff here. Before you have Sounding Staff, you just sit in Fire Stance just so you have enough ki so you can constantly spam out healing ki. But once you get Sounding Staff, this makes it so you get 3 ki each time you strike a target. The ability here, lighting the candle, I actually do like lighting the candle for the leveling. However, once you hit epics, monsters just have too much health, and this doesn't scale hard enough, so I got rid of lighting the candle for the epic difficulty. However, before epics, it was pretty good, and I used a lot during the leveling process, because still 2 ki per strike is very useful once you have Sounding Staff, because this drains your ki generation by 1, but that's okay. In epics, it's not really as important. You don't really notice the additional damage, so that's why we don't really care too much about that. That's pretty much all I have to say about Henshin Mystic. It was really fun. I enjoyed playing it a lot. If I had probably had maybe some more past lives and I had some more hit chance, I would play it all the way through the end game and into high Reaper difficulty, but instead I'm not going to be doing that. Now, to specifically touch on why I chose Fury of the Wild, there's too many two-handed effects to kind of make this character work, and honestly I figured two-handed fighting has to work if I'm playing in Fury of the Wild, because that's where you play two-handed weapons. So what did they change? Well, the biggest changes is, number one, there is this strong swing, so it gives you 25 melee power while two-handed fighting, which is a really good effect. You have another devastating blow, which is +1 critical multiplier and rolls of 1920. I don't know why this cost 2, because a lot of other classes got an extra +1 crit multi, and it cost 1 here, or same thing in Shadow Dancer. This one costs 1 here, so I don't know why it was made to cost 2 in Fury, but because it costs 2, it means you actually can't take Overwhelming Force for the 10-second Adrenaline knockdown, which is kind of sad. And then, of course, you get the Vorpals on a 19 or 20. So I wanted to combine all these things to kind of make a character that works. Because you Vorpal on a 19-20, you almost always have Adrenaline just up. You get Adrenaline back 33% of the time whenever you Vorpal, thanks to Fury Eternal. So you're constantly having Adrenaline, you're constantly spamming it out. And if you can get yourself raged, you get even more wisdom from Acute Instincts here, and you rage yourself using Primal Scream. The twist that I use Martial Hymn because it's pretty much the best DPS buff in the game. It's like a capstone, gives you strength, dexterity, wisdom, sneak attack dice, hit points, physical magical resistance rating, armor class, melee range power. It's ridiculous. Twist that pretty much if you're melee, unless you have somebody casting it on you, like a friend or a bard. Dance of Flowers gives +1 W. First Harmonic Chord is +3 to hit and damage, and Legendary Tactics gives me +6 to all my tactical DCs. So I have pretty much all the hit chance I could possibly get out of the Fury of the Wild tree. Apparently, if I got more pass size, I'd have even more hit chance. But I think, and a little bit more wisdom, I think it's probably about 20 points of hit chance I'm missing, which would make this a lot smoother. But it is a significant amount of work that I don't really want to put into this character. But this is a really good way to play Henshin. If you either have some more gear, some more patience than I do, you can really make it work. And especially things like the extra hit chance against evil creatures, or extra hit chance when sneak attacking from items like the legendary animated rope work really, really well. One thing I want to note before I finish off this video here, well, 2 things. Number 1 is that the Blood Rage Chrism is not supposed to work with Monk Stance. It says this item will uncenter you and break Druidic Oath. It doesn't do that. So you can just use Blood Rage Chrism, the 2-handed weapon, which is great because it gives double strike, which you need, physical magical resistance rating, which you need, and then some DR, which just helps you reduce the damage a lot, especially if you're playing in the lower difficulty. Not too helpful in the high Reaper, but super helpful in the low Reaper and the elite and hard difficulty settings while playing on this type of character. So the last thing I want to touch on is, well, what's wrong? How do you make this good? Why did all these changes get through, and this is still significantly worse than some other things? Because I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. This does less damage than Fist Monk. This does less damage than the Vanguard fighter I was playing before, even with all these crazy new buffs and enhancements and the 200 melee power just walking around. And the answer is because the effects just don't work together. There are too many effects that don't scale off of what you're supposed to scale off of. So you get critical multi out of the tree, you get critical damage from adrenaline, which basically makes it so when you press a button, you guarantee crit on your next attack, and you kill a guy into next week. Well, the problem is, number one, glancing blows. Glancing blows are supposed to be these really cool effects that scale off of your damage. But glancing blows can't critically strike, and they don't scale off of your critical strike damage. So if you critically strike a guy for 50,000, the glancing blow still scales off of your regular hit, which is just unfortunate and not what you want to see out of this type of damage. So my character hits for about 600. My glancing blows hit for about 200. So if I hit a guy for 50,000, my glancing blow is still 200 damage, and that's just not very good. On top of that, glancing blows, unfortunately, because they can't critically strike, when you use something like adrenaline, if you actually miss on your main attack, what will happen is that the glancing blow will then hit, because even if you miss, you can actually glancing blow, and then the glancing blow will soak up the use of the adrenaline overload, which makes it so that the glancing blow now does like 1,000 damage, because it's doing multiple times damage, but since it's absorbing the glancing blow, it goes away, so you didn't get the critical strike on this, which is another problem due to hit chance. So that just doesn't work. And then on top of that, double strike makes it even more offensive. So if I'm playing as a fighter, and one of the reasons why fighter was so good is because you get nearly 100% double strike while playing as the Vanguard, since you get double strike from the shield and double strike from a whole bunch of sources, which meant if you use any of the big attacks out of fighter, like the shield smash or some of the executes that you get out of the Kensai tree, or Deadly Strike, which is a guaranteed critical, if you double strike on that attack, you use it, it hits twice. So you get 2 guaranteed criticals, or you get 2 executes, you do a bunch of extra damage when a monster's under 30% health. However, if you have double strike and you use a big attack, let's say I use Void Strike, I've got my adrenaline overload, and I hit the guy with the Void Strike, and I double strike with it, the first hit uses the adrenaline overload and gets that extra damage and that extra crit chance. And then my double strike doesn't, and it's just a double strike. So all of these big hits just don't matter, and double strike has a much, much lower impact on your character. Yes, double strike is still good, but for whatever reason, because of this doesn't go through the double strike, it just goes on the first thing that consumes the buff, and it doesn't work through all of your attacks. It just doesn't do the same amount of damage. A way to solve this would just be to make adrenaline overload, instead of making your next attack have an effect, adrenaline should just be the attack. If you make adrenaline the whole attack, it actually solves a lot of these problems, so that would probably work. Or, my proposal is to completely change the system entirely, because double strike just doesn't really work and make a lot of sense for two-handed characters, because you just get too many numbers coming up. You're hitting a guy twice, and then each of your attacks is happening, and then the glancing blow is happening, and it's hard to keep track of what's a glancing blow and what's a double strike and what's going on. So, my proposal is a change to the method in which double strike actually functions, in which what actually goes on in the game with two-handed weapons. And that change is to make it so that instead of, like if I was to change everything, I would make it so that power attack no longer drains hit chance from your attack. It just gives you the extra damage. It might sound crazy, but precision has no drawbacks whatsoever, and it's insanely good because it gives you 5% extra hit chance and the ability to critically strike monsters you normally can't. So remove the hit cost from power attack, just let it do the extra damage. And then on top of that, change double strike into double damage while you have the two-handed fighting style. I think that's a very eloquent change and a very easy thing to do. I don't know if it's easy to program, but think about it like this. So instead of my 50% double strike here, I have 50% chance to double damage. So my one single strike that I do gets double the damage. And then you let double damage apply to everything. It applies to cleave, which double strike doesn't apply to, and it applies to glancing blows. So now, instead of having all these extra hits, which doesn't make sense from having a big two-handed weapon, I just get really big attacks that hit really hard. It feels better as a two-handed character. Your glancing blow damage actually manages to scale and increase because it works off of your base damage. If you have 100% double damage on your main hand, then your glancing blow is also going to be double damage, which feels really good. Again, similarly with cleave, most endgame characters are not using any type of cleave because most endgame characters are two-weapon fighters or single-weapon fighters, and cleaves often don't really provide that much damage for the amount of time it takes to actually spin around in a circle and do something dumb. Whereas you'd rather just slice at people and get all those extra double strikes. But big characters like myself, I use cleave all the time, because even though it still has this goofy animation and I'm not doing anything and I can't double strike, it still is enough to be helpful because I need that much extra help. If double strike doesn't apply, make that transitioned double damage into working on cleaves, so that way your character is able to just kick the crap out of people. And then you could just do something like Quick Strike. You could even leave this at gives bonus melee double strike for 15 or for 10 seconds, because then that way this still turns into double damage when you're using two-handed fighting. I think it's a very eloquent way to do it, and that's how I kind of would do it if I was to change this character. Turn Adrenaline Overload, instead of a buff, turn it into an actual attack, so it affects all of what you're doing. That way you also means you can't stack Adrenaline Overload with Void Strike for these really big 70, 80,000 point crits, and it just becomes more streamlined and more fluid. It's easier to understand. And then on top of that, change the actual double strike stat into double damage while you have the two-handed fighting style. It works well with Fury of the Wild. It pushes people into getting these extra big hits, and it feels more thematic because you shouldn't have zillions of numbers coming up from like you're stabbing a guy a million times when you literally just go whoosh, 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 with your big two-handed weapon. So that's what I would change to make this character a little bit more fun. However, at the end of the day, character still is really fun. There'll be in the forum guide, I'll have all the gear and stuff that I'm actually using, because I'm just using pretty basic stuff. You know, the part of the family set, Ring of Terror Valestis, because it's the artifact for wisdom. You know, the Celestial Ruby Ring, because it's Celestial Ruby Ring. The only thing I want to note was the Blood Rage Chrism, because I thought that was kind of neat. Oh, also the weapon is the Staff of Shadow. Best staff in the entire game. If you're planning on playing one, a Henshin Mystic at endgame, consider picking up a Staff of Shadow, because you get it out of killing time, and nobody wants it, because like no one plays Henshin Mystic. Coolest thing is it actually has a hardness of 10,037, so this thing basically never breaks. Slam it against uses, rust monsters, doesn't matter, doesn't break. You can use this as much as you want, which is super fun. You never have to change it to weapon. And because it has 3 augment slots, you can throw in a good, a cold iron, a silver, and now it breaks all damage reduction pretty much in the entire game, and you just slam people to death, which is really fun. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. So if you liked the video, please let me know. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments here, and I will do my best to get back to you. And that's pretty much it. Henshin Mystic. Not better than Fist Monk, but really fun, and I still really enjoy it. As much as you hear me complaining, these are things I would change to make the character better. It's about 20% behind where I would like it to be, but it's still very, very fun. It's just not the best thing if you're looking for the best thing at any game, but still a romp. Anyway, guys, that's it. Have a great day, and I will see you all later.